Hey everyone, good morning. I would start by asking people to come forward if they can, because it makes me feel better. If people are in the back, I'm like, what is it about me? So it's an invitation. If you want to, I would appreciate it. If not, then it's fine. And thank you for being here on a Thursday at 10 a.m. And also, thank you so much for the invitation to be here with you. I came from Lisbon today, so I drove. I left my house at 6 in the morning, so I apologize in advance if I say things that do not make sense. It's been a long week. So allow me to introduce myself. So yes, my name is Ricardo. I'm part of the Web Summit team. I'm head of startups and investors. Essentially, what this means is that I'm very lucky to be working with a team that engages with promising and high growth startups and also with investors, and then through the events that we organize, provide a platform for them to collaborate. I'm in no means an expert in fostering regional innovation strategies to attract investors and support startups in emerging tech ecosystems. What I've been doing for the past now 8 years, because I joined Web Summit in 2017, and before that I was working in startups in Lisbon. So I think one of my main goals here is to pass a little bit of my experience, not only working for one of the largest tech events in the world, but also seeing the transformation that Lisbon and Portugal has had in the last number of years due to not Web Summit, because Web Summit did not come to Portugal to create anything. Web Summit came to give visibility to the things that were already created in Portugal and in Lisbon particularly. And then one of the interesting things that someone mentioned, I think it was Hugo. Hugo was, we have here the Web Summit, but we no means we want to compete with the Web Summit. There's no competition. Like, the more events, the merrier, because ultimately what's important here is to bring people together, and that's what Web Summit is about. So when people invite me to speak at other events, I'm very, very happy to also learn from what other players are doing, because Web Summit also started as something very, very small. So Web Summit started back in 2010 in Dublin. First event had less than 300 people. So it was literally the same idea. It's like, there's no space for entrepreneurs to connect in Dublin. Why cannot we organize an event? And from there, we were very, very lucky. I think luck plays a part. Yes, we are, I think, very good at what we do, but also luck plays a part in the growth that we've had since then. And for those of you that don't know what Web Summit is, global tech event. We organize the biggest event in Europe and one of the biggest events in the world in Lisbon every November, 70,000 people. We cannot grow anymore, unfortunately, but we also have other events. We have an event in Qatar, we have an event in Brazil, and we have an event in Vancouver. So through these events, essentially the idea is to create a platform for people to collaborate, and then it comes to, I don't know what I was doing, and then it comes to essentially fostering regional innovation. So how did we, I guess, help create this tech ecosystem through our events? So starting with, I guess, the beginning. So what is the importance of having an innovation hub? Or what is the importance of having a tech ecosystem? In most cases, or in my personal opinion, I believe that tech is the greatest level playing field. Through tech, people can reach anyone in the world. It doesn't matter if you're based in the Algarve, it doesn't matter if you're based in Lisbon, it doesn't matter if you're based in San Francisco, it doesn't matter if you're based in Cape Verde, where my family is from. It does not matter. Through tech, you can reach anyone, you can build a company that is off to do great things, whatever great things mean for you as an entrepreneur. Great things might be getting an exit, so getting a lot of money so that you can continue and proceed with other projects. Success might be creating a solution that actually solves a societal problem or an environmental problem. So whatever it is that you want to do through tech, it's much, much easier. But as an entrepreneur or as someone working in tech, you cannot do things alone, right? So you need people to collaborate with you. That's where the ecosystem comes into play. So why it is important for say the Algarve to now be invested in creating an innovation hub to attract people to come to the Algarve to see this beautiful landscape. I was actually, when I was walking, I was like, this is the first time, and I've been to many, many events. I was in Guimarães on Tuesday speaking at another event, and that talk was about how to make the most out of tech events based on my experience. And I was like, okay, so in order for me to pass my experience, I kind of like need to understand how many events have I participated in my life, tech events. And I got to count, and I stopped at 50. Both from organization perspective, because through Web Summit, I've been to more than 20 Web Summits, but also as a speaker, as a staff, as a volunteer. So I've been to many, many events. And I was telling Antonio from the Algarve Evolution team that I've never seen a stage where you can see the beach. So if anything this is incredible. So if you're bored from what I'm saying, you can just look at the beach and meditate for 5 minutes, and it's incredible. So I think, as I was saying, that no one goes far alone, right? So you need an ecosystem around you. So the importance of having an innovation hub or a tech ecosystem is that it impulses the economy in any place, right? So going back to the example of Lisbon, everyone that's here, I think it's old enough to remember the crisis in 2007 to 2010, 11, 12. A lot of people lost their jobs, a lot of people lost their livelihoods, a lot of people lost even their houses. So one of the ways that Lisbon looked at the future was, how can we then get out of here? How can we make sure that people have enough opportunities? I was in uni at the time. I was studying computer science, and I remember reading an article that kind of let me shook, which was back in 2011, from people that were 25 or younger, there was a 50% unemployment rate. Meaning that I was looking around to my colleagues, and I was like, okay, so out of everyone here, half of us will not have a job when we get away from uni. So what can we do here? What we can do is tech, right? Is creating projects through technology that will allow us to, if anything, at least learn. We might not make money because at the time there were no investors. At the time there was no really a culture of startups in Lisbon, but at least we can learn. And through learning, then we can be prepared for when the opportunity comes to work maybe in a big company, an EDP, a critical software, or whatever it is, then I will be more ready. So through this small start, it's kind of spun, right? It's like a lot of people started working in tech, a lot of people started creating businesses, and that started to attract more people. So the importance of having an innovation hub is to develop the region. What does it mean? So that people have more opportunities, whatever that means for you. Whether if you're an entrepreneur, if you're one of those people that cannot work in a company where someone tells you what to do, you have the opportunity to create your own thing, and then maybe you're the one telling other people what to do. If by all means you do not like to be an entrepreneur, for instance, I don't want to be an entrepreneur. I learned that the hard way and the easy way. I'm not an entrepreneur, but I like talking to entrepreneurs, and I like supporting entrepreneurs through the work that I do. So there's more opportunities. So that means that we are generating a movement of people that come to our regions. Hence, I think that this thing, what I'm saying here, is what is already happening through things like the Algarve Tech Hub Summit, right? Is like bring people together so that people understand what is happening in the region, what is happening in other regions. I see that we have people from different countries here that are exposed to the things that we are creating. When we think about innovation hubs, usually the first one that comes to mind, Silicon Valley, right? It's like we think about Silicon Valley because Silicon Valley was or was the mecca of technology. How did that happen? Essentially through network effects. You have a place in which you have the academia, you have a lot of top universities, you have investors, and you have talent. If you join those three things, the sky's the limit. This is all easy to say, but in practice, especially in the nowadays, is harder because, especially for emerging tech ecosystems, whatever that means, in my perception, an emerging tech ecosystem is a place, a region, a city that is betting on creating opportunities through technology. There's a lot of challenges right now, right? So one of the main challenges, one of the first challenges that anyone faces when starting a company is money, right? If I don't have money to pay my bills, I can't really create a company because I need money to pay my bills. If I don't have a strong support network of people that might give me money to create my company, I will not be able to do that. So one of the first challenges that any tech ecosystem has is access to capital. It's like, how can we, as a region, how can we, as a city, attract people, funds, companies to inject capital so that the barrier to entry for any entrepreneur is lower? Because again, entrepreneurship is a game, but it's a game that not everyone can play. And in order for people to play that game, they need to have money again to be able to at least survive. And then you have, most cases, talent shortage. What does mean is that in the specific case of the Algarve, and then I have a couple of slides that I researched about the Algarve tech ecosystem, one of the things that happens in most cases is that talent gets concentrated. What does that mean? In the case of Portugal, people usually, what happens is that I may be from Porto, or I may be from Viseu, or I may be from Castelo Branco. I go study in Lisbon, or I go study in Porto, and then I stay in Porto or I stay in Lisbon because talent is concentrated, more opportunities are concentrated. In the case of the Algarve, that's one of the challenges that I think will happen in the future, which is I go to Alg, I study in Alg, I look around, and if there's nothing around, if there's no opportunities, what happens is that I'll move to Portugal. And then what is happening to Portugal is that we are now competing with other tech hubs internationally. So people are not even staying in Portugal. I study in the Algarve, and then I go to London, I go to Paris, I go to Madrid, I go to Barcelona. So a lot of cities and a lot of regions are essentially competing for this, for talent. The competition for talent is fierce. Sometimes in some cities, not necessarily in the Algarve, because I do think that the Algarve has, or is starting to have, the right infrastructure. And when I say infrastructure, it's both digital infrastructure and physical infrastructure. Physical infrastructure means co-working spaces, means accelerators, means incubators. Digital infrastructures means everything that an entrepreneur within tech needs to scale their business, whether that is connectivity, whether that is an opportunity to, again, be able to deploy whatever solution they're deploying within the region. And then sometimes, and I think Portugal, for all its faults as a country, is doing a lot of things well within this space. How can we attract, how can we create the opportunities for people to remain in the country, to remain in the regions through policy? Through policy regulation, how can we make it easier for people to create their businesses? How can we make it easier for people to not only create, but also grow their businesses? So how do we then go about helping startups, right? How do we do this? So first and foremost, policymakers. Antonio was telling me that there was the institutional day yesterday. We had a lot of policymakers in the room. That's usually the first thing that you need, is a framework that allows people, once again, to create their companies in a very simple manner. And for that, you need technology. So embracing digitalization from a policy perspective is usually the first step in order for people to start thinking about creating a company. Because if I'm an entrepreneur wannabe, and if I look at the policy framework that I need to follow in order for me to create the company, and then it's super complicated, I need to hire someone to help me understand how to do this, maybe I'm not going to do it. Maybe there's easier things to do. So on the first hand is we need policy. We need politicians. We need the framework in order for people to be able to create their startups. Secondly, connected to the first, tax incentives and funding, as I was mentioning before, right? Is how can we as a region, how can we as a city help our entrepreneurs from a tax perspective? Okay, if you create a company, we'll give you X. If you look at the policy framework within Portugal, we are already doing that, right? It's like we're trying to attract international people through programs like the non-habitual residence that was rebranded, but essentially we are attracting qualified people to the country. And then those qualified people will also bring not only their experience, but the money and the funding and their networks that they have with them. We also need incubators and accelerators because being a founder is one of the hardest things in the world. Maybe after being a mom, not a dad, a mom, after being a mom probably is one of the hardest things in the world. And it's incredibly hard for you to do it if you don't have a strong support network. Incubators and accelerators provide you exactly that. Not only they provide you a framework and contacts and opportunities for you to grow your company, but they also provide you with a network. That's essentially, for instance, my role in Web Summit is to provide a network with the founders that we engage with. It's incredibly helpful to have someone by your side that is going through the same things that you're going. If I'm a founder, I cannot raise capital, maybe I talk to someone that was a founder, couldn't raise capital at first, and then they raised capital. So how did you do it? What are the mistakes that you did? Right? What are the mistakes that you did? Because not only people learn from the things that go well, but also for the things that don't go well. That's one of my mottos in life is I much rather prefer actually learn from all of you of the things that didn't go well in your life for me to avoid that. And then we have the mentorship and network building that comes attached to it, right? Because when you start having the critical mass of entrepreneurs, you start having people that have gone through the things and can teach the new generation of entrepreneurs how to do things. And then you have, for instance, the WALG. WALG universities are an incredible component, one of the critical pieces for entrepreneurs to be able to thrive, not only because of the knowledge, but also because of the fact that they are the engine that feeds the pipeline of talent. People go to the university, people learn, and people then either want to create their own company or want to start or want to work in startups. So it's these 5 things, in my eyes, that can help propel any environment where you want to see tech startups thrive. A caveat before this slide. Typically speaking, the first thing that entrepreneurs or anyone with a startup typically say when I'm talking to them about, say, Web Summit or what are they looking for, what's not, they always say investors. It's like, I need investors because investors will give me money and that money will provide me with enough opportunities for me to scale my business. I usually say that's wrong. As an entrepreneur, as a founder, what you need to focus on is clients, right? If you can create a company without any funding, that's both the hardest thing that you can do, but also the best thing that you can do because, as we say in Portuguese, no almoço grátis, there's no free lunches, right? So an investor is giving you money, but they're not giving you money out of their goodness of their heart. Sometimes yes, but they want something in return, right? So if an investor comes and offers you money, you're doing something well, congratulations, but you're also going to give something back. Usually that something is equity. I'm an investor, someone is looking for money, I'll give you money, but then I ask for 20% of your company. So 20% of everything that you're going to do in your company from that point onwards is going to be mine. Okay? So if you can, avoid investors. If there's investors in the room, I'm sorry, but that's how I see things. But in most cases, it's really, really hard for a small startup to then be able to scale without that little help, without investment, okay? So that investment can look very differently. It can look like grants, it can look like competitions, and then it can look like an angel investor, a VC fund, a CVC, etc. So you need money. So for a tech ecosystem to thrive, you do need money, you do need investors. Whether you like it or not, you need investors. What are investors looking for? So first and foremost, they're looking for, again, a pipeline of strong talent. If you go back to Silicon Valley grew also because of universities like Stanford, right? It's like they are just there providing with essentially a non-stop pipeline of talent. So if I'm an investor and if I come to the Algarve, one of the first things that I'm going to look for is, okay, tell me about the ecosystem. Tell me about like the people that are here, the founders, the employees, how many startups, what are the startups doing, what is their industry, so that I can have a clear picture. Because if I look into a tech ecosystem and then I realize, okay, there's nothing here aside from a couple of startups, I'm not going to waste my time and I'm going to go maybe to other places in which, again, the talent is concentrated. Then they also like the infrastructure and connectivity. What we mean by that, kind of going back to the previous slide, infrastructure, both digital and physical. What are the systems in place that are allowing these founders to grow? And if there are systems in place that are allowing founders to grow, then I'm interested in, again, engaging with those founders. And then thirdly, and probably the most important from an investor perspective, looking at a startup is a clear business plan and a clear way that that founder or that company has to scale their business. If I'm an investor and if I talk to a company and that company is not very clear on how they're planning to scale, I'm not going to invest money. And one of the really important things here, and I think one of the things that differentiate Portugal, not only the Algarve, but Portugal as a tech hub, is the fact that our market is so small that we need to start thinking big from the get-go. If you create a startup thinking that you will be able to scale to massive levels, obviously, again, success is different for many people, but if you want to scale, you need to start thinking about the Iberian market, the European market, maybe the Latin market, maybe the world market, right? So in that sense, I think the Algarve and Portugal already start with a little step ahead than other ecosystems because, again, we are international by default. If we're not international, if you're creating a startup, a tech startup in Portugal and you're thinking international, you're already missing a bit. So some success stories, and again, success means something different for everyone. I have 3 here, and I'm actually going to talk about 4. So the first one is, I guess, is comparable more to Portugal than the Algarve, which is Estonia, right? So Estonia was a country that was part of the Soviet Union, and after the Soviet Union, they essentially focused on technology. Like everyone came together to focus on technology. The government, universities, private sector, everyone focused in technology. And right now, Estonia is regarded as the e-country of Europe. It's interesting because they have a program in which you don't even have to be in Estonia. You can get a business license in Estonia. You can incorporate your company in Estonia without being there, which is, again, incredible because that's what they're doing, right? It's like, how can we inject companies, inject talent, inject investors, even if they're not here? So maybe that's one of the learnings for Portugal or for the Algarve is how can we do something similar, right? It's like, how can we make it easier for people that, even if they don't come to Portugal or even if they don't come to the Algarve, they can still engage with our ecosystem. Because in most cases, I think when people come to Portugal, when people come to the Algarve, it's impossible not to love this country. It's impossible not to be here at 9 a.m. on a Thursday, almost in November, and being like, if I wanted to go to the beach, maybe not to lay down, but maybe to go for a run, I could. So I think that takes care of itself, and I think Web Summit has seen that. I've seen that. A lot of people that come to Web Summit for the first time, and they're like, what is this country? It's like, well, it's Portugal, one of the best countries in the world, or the best country in the world. So how can we do that even if people are not coming to the country? Then another example would be Bali. So Bali is interesting because when you think about Bali, typically speaking, or when you thought about Bali in the past, you never thought about tech. You thought about surf, you thought about healthy food, you thought about meditation, you thought about jungles, you thought about motorcycles. But because they were attracting people, this was back in the day, this was before the era of digital nomads and the era that we're living now. They saw that as an opportunity, right? It's like we have so many people coming from abroad to do this. Typically speaking, there are people with higher purchasing power. How can we make it so that they can stay? So they started by creating a network of co-working spaces so that people could then come to the country, and instead of spending 2 weeks on holidays, they could spend maybe a month working. And from them, that's the first step. So things like the room that is right opposite us is a good way for us to create the opportunities for people to come, even if they work in other countries, and spend here some time working in our cities. And then you have Lisbon. Lisbon, I think it's one of the best examples of a city or of a country. Let's talk Portugal, let's not talk Lisbon. I think what we've seen over the past number of years has been nothing short of spectacular, with the caveat again that obviously there's challenges. With all of these, there's challenges, right? And we are now seeing the challenges of such an influx of people coming to the country. But let's not talk about that. Let's talk about the fact that it was a city that, again, no one thought about Lisbon in 2010 as a tech ecosystem, a tech hub. They thought about it maybe as the poor cousin of Spain. And now people look at Lisbon and they look, it's a country where things are happening because you have startups, you have the Web Summit, you have co-working spaces, you have incubators, you have accelerators, you have hackathons, you have startup competitions. So the things that I hear the most at Web Summit every November is like, Jesus Christ, what happened in Lisbon? Because I came like 5 years ago and it's a completely different city. But that's just because people came together and people started to collaborate. And then I wanted to give another example that I forgot to put in the slide, which is Fundão. Right? Fundão. For the people in Portugal, you know Fundão. People from abroad, you might never heard the word Fundão. So Fundão is a small town, city, in the north of Portugal, northeast. And what they've been doing, again, is nothing short of spectacular in the sense that they've been able to attract many, many people to live in a rural area, which is one of the biggest challenges that not only Portugal, but also the world is happening, right? Which is like people are moving more and more to cities and the interior of the countries are becoming isolated. So Fundão, through a number of different initiatives from the local government, not necessarily from the national government, from the local government, they were able to attract startups, they were able to attract corporates, they were able to attract even, again, digital nomads. Digital nomads, usually they go to places because they like the vibe, they like the beach, so they coming to Fundão. So I think that if I was in the Algarve, I would be collaborating and talking a little bit more with Fundão. And then, just to finalize, I did a little research about the Algarve. So I think, again, things like the Algarve Tech Hub, things like the Algarve Evolution are the first step, right? It's like, how are we promoting innovation? Promoting innovation is nothing short of bringing people together. So things like this are incredible for the region, or things like the AIA community, which is a community focused on AI that I think Algarve Evolution brought to the Algarve. Then if you look at the economy in the Algarve, you have strategic sectors, right? You have tourism, for sure. Was it three-fourths of the GDP in the Algarve is around tourism, but you also have different opportunities. You have agri-tech, you have the blue economy, you have many different things in which the Algarve can differentiate themselves and can bet on those regions and those industries and geographies to thrive. Then the Algarve is cool. But the Algarve was also cool, and I think the Algarve now faces something that maybe Bali was facing a number of years back, because when people think about the Algarve, when I think about the Algarve, before maybe this invitation, I come to the Algarve very frequently. I come to the Algarve for vacation, for holidays. If I think about the Algarve right now, I think of holidays, and I think of, excuse me, British people. There's a lot of British people, and there's holidays. It wouldn't be necessarily a place in which I would go and stay. So I think that is both a blessing and a curse. A blessing because, again, it's incredibly hard for someone to come to the Algarve and do not like the Algarve. A curse because there's already a brand of the Algarve that we need to maybe work on. And then the government and international support, both from the national level and also from the local level. So this is just me trying to give ideas and to wrap it up, because if you go back to the name of the session, it was strategies to foster regional innovation. So first one, strengthen digital and physical infrastructure. So continue with creation of co-working spaces, incubators, accelerators. 5G is not necessarily a problem in the Algarve, but also support digital infrastructure. Then you have increased access to capital through venture funding. Again, capital and funding is incredibly important for any tech ecosystem to thrive. So regional venture capital funds. We have a lot of high net worth individuals in the Algarve. So angel investing programs can also be created within the Algarve. Foster global talent acquisition and retention. I think the retention part is the most important part here, is how can we make sure that the talent in the Algarve stay in the Algarve? And then going back to the brand, how can we make sure that we are telling the world about the Algarve, so that when they think about the Algarve from now on, they don't necessarily only think about holidays and British people, but maybe they think about holidays, British people, and an amazing place for me to set up my startup. That's it. Thank you very much.